Have you ever noticed that when a man truly levels up, when he changes how he carries himself, how he speaks, how he moves, people around him change too? Doors start opening, eyes start watching, conversations feel different, and most surprisingly, women begin to respond to him in ways they never did before. They're curious, captivated, sometimes even intimidated. It's not magic, it's not luck, it's because he's becoming the man they can't ignore. If you've ever wondered why some men can walk into a room and shift the energy without saying a word, this video is going to show you exactly why. We're diving deep into 9 unmistakable signs that you're not just growing. You're evolving into something powerful. Women feel it. The world feels it. And the moment you start recognizing these signs in yourself, everything begins to change. Before we dive in, if this video sparks something in you, if it adds value, direction, or even a new mindset, please support this channel. Every like, every comment, every share helps us make this message reach more men who need to hear it. More importantly, you help us bring clarity, purpose, and strength to women who deserve to meet the men they were meant to connect with. Your support makes transformation possible for thousands. Let's get started. 1. You are comfortable with silence. There is a quiet kind of power that only few men ever discover, and it begins the moment you stop fearing silence. Most people, without even realizing it, are deeply uncomfortable with stillness. They fill conversations with words that have no meaning. They talk just to avoid a pause. They answer questions before they've even fully heard them. They laugh too loudly, speak too quickly, or interrupt too often, not because they have something to say, but because silence makes them anxious. It feels like a threat, like an awkward gap that needs to be sealed. But when you start growing, when you start evolving into the man who no longer needs to prove anything, you stop seeing silence as a void. You begin to see it as space, as clarity, as presence. You realize that silence, in its purest form, is not empty. It's full, full of depth, full of strength, full of confidence. Being comfortable with silence means you no longer seek to perform. You no longer rush to answer a question just to sound smart or quick. You take your time, you listen fully. You pause before responding. You let your words carry weight, not just volume. And when you do speak, it's not because you're trying to impress. It's because you have something worth sharing. The more you sit in silence, the more you begin to understand yourself. You become less reactive and more intentional. You're no longer trying to fill space. You're choosing when and how to fill it. That's the difference between noise and presence. And it changes how people experience you. It changes how women experience you. Women especially are incredibly tuned into energy, often more than men realize. They pick up on everything: your posture, your pacing, your tone, your stillness. And when a man walks into a space and doesn't speak unless necessary, when he holds a pause without fidgeting, when he's able to sit across from her and simply be without needing to win her over with words, that stands out. Because it's rare. Because most men try to impress her with how much they can say, how fast they can speak, or how clever they can sound. But you don't. You're not playing that game. You've moved beyond it. You're not performing. You're simply present. And presence is powerful. It's not loud, but it's felt. It carries a gravity that draws attention without effort. In silence, you demonstrate that you're not afraid to be seen. You're not uncomfortable with stillness because you've learned to be at peace with yourself. That self-possession, that internal stability, radiates outward. It communicates confidence, not arrogance. It says, I'm here, I'm listening, and I'm not in a rush. And that alone commands more respect than 1,000 clever lines. When you're comfortable with silence, you become a mirror. People feel their own energy reflected back at them. Some will be drawn in, some will feel exposed, but either way, they'll feel something, and that's unforgettable. This shift also impacts how you handle tension. In arguments, you don't escalate. You breathe, you pause, you stay centered. That calmness unsettles those who expect chaos. In negotiations, you wait. You hold silence after your offer. You don't rush to fill the gap. That patience often wins more than persuasion. In social settings, you observe. You don't compete to be the loudest. You choose your moment. And when you speak, people listen. Because your silence has taught them that when you do talk, it matters. Becoming comfortable with silence is not about becoming passive or distant. It's about becoming intentional. It's about owning your space, mentally, emotionally, and physically. It's about valuing your voice enough to not throw it away on meaningless chatter. It's about listening more deeply, connecting more authentically, and living more deliberately. You no longer fear the space between words. You recognize it as the space where trust is built, where attention is earned, where presence is felt. And perhaps most importantly, silence is where you meet yourself. It's in those quiet moments, when no one is watching, when nothing needs to be said, that you begin to understand what truly matters to you. You confront your fears, you sit with your pain, you listen to your intuition, and in doing so, you build something that no one can take away: inner peace. That peace becomes the foundation of everything else. It makes your confidence real, your interactions genuine, your presence magnetic, because you're not trying to impress anyone anymore. Not even with your words. You're just being. And that's enough. That's powerful. That's unforgettable. 2. You are emotionally self-sufficient. Emotional self-sufficiency is one of the most powerful transformations a man can undergo, yet it often goes unnoticed until its effects become undeniable. For a long time, you may have found yourself reacting to every emotional wave that came your way. If someone complimented you, your spirit soared. If someone ignored you, your mood sank. A small moment of praise would light you up, while one moment of disapproval could ruin your entire day. You may not have even realized how much control the external world had over your internal peace. You were tethered emotionally to the actions and opinions of others, especially women. Their words determined how you felt about yourself. Their interest validated your worth. Their withdrawal left you empty. That constant emotional swinging wasn't freedom. It was quiet dependence. And that dependence robbed you of stability, clarity, and strength. But then, something shifted. Maybe it didn't happen overnight, but over time, you began to reclaim your emotional center. You started recognizing that the world outside of you doesn't owe you comfort, happiness, or validation. You realized that chasing approval is a form of emotional slavery, that needing constant reassurance is no different from being emotionally addicted to other people. So, you began building something stronger. You started creating emotional stability from within. You began setting a rhythm for your life that wasn't dictated by who texted back or who gave you attention. You started anchoring yourself in daily habits that made you feel grounded. Waking up early, moving your body, taking time to reflect, creating space for growth. These routines weren't flashy or grand, but they built something priceless: emotional independence. And with that independence came emotional power. You stopped asking for permission to feel good. You stopped needing people to make you feel worthy. You no longer needed her to tell you you're enough, because you already knew. You built your peace like a fortress, quiet, stable, and impenetrable. You began to understand that your emotional state is not something to be handed over to anyone else. It's your responsibility. It's your domain. And you protect it fiercely. This doesn't mean you become cold, distant, or numb. Quite the opposite. You become more open, more loving, more present. Because your love is not desperate. It's generous. It's rooted in wholeness, not in lack. When a woman meets a man like this, it's a rare and unforgettable experience. She feels the difference immediately. You're not pulling energy from her. You're adding to the room. You're not seeking affection like a thirsty traveler. You're offering warmth like a fire that's already lit. Most men, even those who appear confident on the outside, are secretly hoping to be chosen, validated, and affirmed by women. They show up with charm, status, or humor. But underneath it all is the silent question: am I enough for you? And women can sense that. They feel that quiet emotional hunger. And even if they don't consciously judge it, it affects how safe, attracted, and inspired they feel around that man. But you're different now. You've detached your emotions from external reactions. You're not swayed by her mood swings or her silence. You're not performing to earn her approval. You're not shattered when she pulls away. You feel your emotions, you acknowledge them, but you don't let them control you. You have a core now, a grounded presence, an emotional gravity. And that gravity pulls people in, not because it's demanding, but because it's rare. It's not a void that needs to be filled. It's a presence that others want to be near. You've stopped asking to be chosen. You've chosen yourself. And that choice makes all the difference. Self-sufficiency also means you've mastered the art of solitude. You enjoy your own company. You don't fear being alone. In fact, you use solitude to sharpen your focus, deepen your thoughts, and elevate your peace. You no longer need a relationship to feel complete. You're already whole. Relationships become a bonus, not a requirement. You don't chase love because you're lonely. You allow love because you're open. This makes you incredibly attractive, not in a flashy or superficial way, but in a grounded, magnetic way. Because emotional independence is confidence in its most mature form. It doesn't need to announce itself. It's felt in how you walk, how you speak, and how you respond to life. And perhaps most importantly, emotional self-sufficiency gives you freedom. The freedom to be yourself. The freedom to walk away from what doesn't serve you. The freedom to show up fully without needing to be perfect. The freedom to pursue purpose without being derailed by every emotional storm. It makes you steady in a world full of chaos. It makes you valuable, not because you need anything, but because you bring something. That kind of man doesn't just attract women, he inspires them, he leads them, he heals them by showing them what calm masculinity looks like. So, when you reach this place of emotional self-sufficiency, it's not just a personal victory, it's a transformation that touches every part of your life. You become a better friend, a stronger partner, a more focused man. You stop waiting for someone to fix you or complete you. You realize that everything you were looking for already lived inside you, waiting to be discovered, developed, and protected. And when you truly understand that, you no longer look outward for worth. You live it, you embody it, you walk in it. And that walk, it's what makes you unforgettable. 3. You communicate your values clearly. There comes a time in a man's life when he can no longer remain silent about what he stands for. Not because he wants to be loud, not because he wants to start conflict, but because staying silent feels like betraying himself. That's when he begins to communicate his values clearly, not just in words, but in how he lives. Before this transformation, you may have found yourself compromising often. You agreed with opinions you didn't fully support. You laughed at jokes that crossed your line. You tolerated behavior that quietly disrespected your boundaries. You thought saying yes made you likable, that being agreeable made you safe, and that avoiding friction was the key to connection. But in trying to be everything to everyone, you lost pieces of yourself. And those missing pieces created a growing tension inside, a tension that never let you feel truly free or truly respected. But when you begin to mature emotionally and mentally, you realize that respect doesn't come from blending in. It comes from standing firm. And so, you start choosing honesty over harmony. You start telling the truth, not for shock value, but because truth is how you remain whole. You don't go out of your way to argue, but you no longer stay quiet when something violates your principles. If a conversation starts heading in a direction that doesn't align with your beliefs, you don't nod and pretend. You respond calmly, clearly. You say, "That's not how I see it," or "That doesn't sit right with me." Not because you need to be right, but because you need to be real. And there is a quiet, commanding strength in a man who can do that without raising his voice or getting defensive. When you live this way, your values stop being just thoughts in your mind. They become the fabric of your life. They show up in your decisions, your friendships, your work, your time, and your energy. You stop accepting invitations to places that drain your spirit. You stop laughing at things that don't feel right. You stop giving your energy to people who treat your boundaries as suggestions. And most importantly, you stop making apologies for who you are. You don't water yourself down to be digestible. You don't dilute your standards to avoid being labeled difficult. You stop fearing the label of too serious or too direct. Because you understand that clarity is not cruelty. It's a gift to yourself and to everyone around you. And women notice this change instantly. They feel it. They are used to men who bend to please them, who agree with everything they say, who never challenge anything, even when they disagree deep down. But when a woman encounters a man who can stand his ground with calm confidence, who can express disagreement without attacking, who can say, no, that's not for me, and still maintain warmth and connection. Something shifts. She may not even know why, but she feels more attracted, more curious, and more secure because she senses that you are rooted, that you are not lost in her opinions, that you are not seeking her approval to define your value. And in that space, true respect is born. The beauty of communicating your values clearly is that it also filters your relationships. You no longer entertain people who are out of alignment with your deeper principles. You no longer keep friends out of nostalgia or fear of being alone. You no longer chase women who ignore your standards or try to shame you for having them. Instead, you attract people who resonate with your truth. You attract friendships that energize you. You attract women who admire your honesty and feel safe in your presence. Not because you agree on everything, but because they know where you stand. There's no guessing, no manipulation, no mixed signals, just clarity. And it's not always easy. Standing in your truth comes with moments of discomfort. You'll lose people. You'll walk away from situations you once tolerated. You'll be misunderstood. But the reward is peace. Deep, stable peace. The kind that allows you to wake up in the morning and look at yourself in the mirror without shame, without regret, without the weight of pretending. You'll start building a life that reflects your values, not one that just avoids rejection. And in that process, you discover that freedom doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being honest. And respect, real respect, comes not from pleasing everyone, but from being unshakably yourself. So, when you reach this level, when you speak your truth not to dominate, but to express, not to impress, but to be known, you become the man people remember, the man people trust, the man who can lead without force and love without losing himself. And in that space, real connection is born, because connection built on clarity is connection that lasts. 4. Your focus shifts to your mission. One of the most defining, life-altering transformations a man can go through is when he stops making women the center of his universe and starts aligning his entire being around a mission greater than himself. For much of your earlier life, you may have placed romantic attention at the core of your motivation. You tried harder at the gym so women would notice. You learned how to speak smoother, dress sharper, move more confidently, not for your own internal pride, but for how it might be received by someone else. And for a while, that might have worked. You got attention. You received praise. You earned affection. But over time, it began to feel hollow. Because every accomplishment, every moment of satisfaction, was built on a foundation that relied on the approval of others. And if that approval disappeared, so did your confidence. So did your drive. So did your sense of self. Then something changes. Maybe it's subtle at first, a question you begin asking more often like, why am I really doing this? Or maybe it comes from pain, a heartbreak that shatters the illusion that another person could be your purpose. But either way, the shift begins. You start to feel the emptiness in living a life where your greatest pursuit is being liked, being loved, being desired. You start to see that no matter how many women notice you, none of it fills the void inside if you haven't built a direction of your own. And so, you begin to turn inward, not to hide, but to build, to rebuild, to ask yourself, what am I here for? And when you start answering that question with clarity and commitment, you feel something you may never have truly felt before: fire. Not the fleeting fire of emotional excitement, but a deeper fire, the one that wakes you up at 5 a.m., not because you have to, but because you want to. The fire that makes you work longer, not for applause, but for the sheer satisfaction of knowing you're building something real, a life that reflects your principles, a vision that pulls you forward, a purpose that makes you proud. When your focus shifts to your mission, everything else begins to reorganize. You no longer waste hours obsessing over text replies or whether someone likes you back. Your calendar starts filling with action steps instead of distractions. Your time becomes sacred. Your priorities sharpen. You move with urgency, but not chaos, with purpose, but not pressure. And this shift doesn't make you less attractive to women. It makes you magnetic. Because now you're not reaching out of emptiness, but moving out of fullness. Women feel this change more deeply than words can explain. They can sense when a man is focused on them as a solution to his loneliness, versus a man who invites them into a world that already has meaning, structure, and purpose. The second man, the one on a mission, is the one who causes them to pause. Because he's not orbiting around her. He has a center of gravity that holds on its own. He doesn't need constant validation because he's too busy becoming excellent. And excellence, real excellence, is attractive on a cellular level. When your mission becomes the foundation of your life, your standards elevate across the board. You no longer tolerate disrespect, not because you're insecure, but because you don't have the time or emotional bandwidth to entertain it. You stop wasting hours on gossip, distractions, or meaningless pursuits. You guard your energy like a soldier protects a fortress, because you know that every drop of focus matters when you're building something real. And the beautiful part? You don't need to explain this to anyone. The results speak, the discipline shows, your walk changes, your tone deepens, your presence becomes a message in itself. I'm going somewhere, and I'm not stopping for anyone who isn't aligned with the path. This doesn't mean you reject connection. In fact, you become more capable of connection, deeper, richer, more aligned connection. But it's no longer your fuel. It's no longer the reason you get out of bed. It's an addition, not a replacement for self-worth. And because of this, you become a leader in your relationships. You're not trying to be chosen. You're doing the choosing based on who complements your direction, not just who makes you feel good in the moment. Your love becomes sharper, your yes becomes more powerful, and your no becomes clearer. When your focus shifts to your mission, you start seeing your life differently. You're not chasing short-term excitement anymore. You're building long-term fulfillment. And that fulfillment shapes your identity in a way nothing else can. It gives your words more impact, your presence more gravity, and your future more direction. You're not just a man existing day to day. You're a man becoming, someone with something to contribute, something to create, something to build that outlasts him. And when that fire is lit, when that direction becomes internalized, there is no going back. Because now you've tasted purpose. You've felt what it's like to move not for applause, not for likes, not for sex, but for meaning, for growth, for legacy. And that man is rare. That man is undeniable. That man, even in silence, even in stillness, even in solitude, he is powerful. He doesn't need to be noticed. He's focused. And that focus reshapes not only his relationships, but the entire trajectory of his life. Because everything falls into place when the mission comes first. 5. You start challenging women. At a certain point in your personal growth, you begin to realize that true respect from anyone, especially from women, is never earned by flattery or constant agreement. It's earned through authenticity, honesty, and unwavering self-respect. When you were less experienced, you might have thought that the best way to connect with women was to always agree with them, to validate every statement they made, to avoid any form of disagreement or discomfort. You thought that if you could just be nice enough, agreeable enough, smooth enough, you'd be liked, wanted, and loved. But what you didn't realize at the time was that this constant appeasement was not only suffocating your own voice, but it was silently draining your masculine edge. And that edge is what creates polarity, tension, and attraction. As you evolve, you grow out of the need to be liked. You let go of the fear that disagreement means rejection. You stop treating every woman like someone you must tiptoe around, and instead, you start treating her like an equal human being, one capable of handling your truth, your perspective, your standards. You begin to challenge her, not from a place of ego or dominance, but from a place of clarity. You challenge her when she says something that lacks logic or integrity, not to put her down, but to bring the conversation into a space of truth. You question her assumptions not to provoke her, but to deepen the interaction. And when she notices that you're not just another man nodding his head in blind agreement, she feels something different. She feels stimulated, engaged, awake. She feels your presence, not as someone who needs her approval, but as someone who stands in his own. Women are surrounded by people who tell them what they want to hear, friends who echo their thoughts, social media that validates their every mood, men who chase them with compliments and never once ask a challenging question. So when she meets a man who looks her in the eyes and says, "I don't think that's true," or "That's not how I live," it disrupts the pattern. It causes her to pause, not in anger, but in curiosity. Who is this man? Why isn't he reacting like the others? You've now entered a different category. You're no longer just another voice in the crowd. You've become a presence, a contrast, a force that doesn't bend easily. And that challenging a woman doesn't mean arguing for the sake of ego. It means standing firm in what you know is right, even when it's inconvenient. It means not laughing at ideas you don't find funny. It means not agreeing with values that contradict your core beliefs. It means being willing to walk away when your standards are not met. And perhaps most importantly, it means inviting her into a deeper kind of connection, one built not on surface level agreement, but on mutual challenge, mutual respect, and mutual growth. When you challenge her thinking, you invite her into real intimacy. Because now she's not just interacting with a version of you crafted to win her over. She's interacting with a man who shows up as he truly is and invites her to do the same. And make no mistake, this kind of dynamic can be electric. It creates tension, the good kind, the kind that sparks interest, engagement, and respect. She may not always agree with you. In fact, she might push back. But the energy between you becomes more alive because you're not just feeding her ego, you're feeding her mind. You're not just complimenting her beauty, you're engaging her thoughts. You're not just validating her existence, you're treating her like a person worthy of challenge, capable of growth, and deserving of truth. That is rare, that is valuable, that is masculine. Over time, this habit of respectfully challenging women transforms your relationships. It filters out the ones who want to be worshipped instead of met. It attracts those who crave substance over submission, truth over comfort. You stop getting trapped in dynamics where you have to constantly please or entertain. You begin forming connections rooted in authenticity and depth. And in those connections, you experience something far more fulfilling than attention or approval. You experience mutual expansion. So, don't be afraid to challenge her. Don't be afraid to be the man who says no, the man who calls things out, the man who holds her to a higher standard. Not because you think you're better, but because you refuse to shrink. You refuse to live small. You refuse to play a character in someone else's fantasy. You choose truth. You choose presence. You choose alignment. And in doing so, you become unforgettable. You become the man who doesn't flatter to attract, but challenges to connect. And that kind of man changes every room he walks into and every life he touches. 6. Your energy becomes magnetic. There comes a moment in a man's journey where he starts to realize that real influence isn't about how loud he is, how flashy he dresses, or how clever his words sound. It's not about constantly trying to be seen, heard, or admired. In fact, true magnetism has very little to do with effort and everything to do with presence. And the moment you stop focusing on controlling how others perceive you and instead begin directing that focus inward into your purpose, your habits, your discipline, your internal peace, your energy changes, slowly but unmistakably. You become calm where you used to be anxious. You become certain where you used to be unsure. You begin carrying yourself differently, not because you're trying to impress anyone, but because you've become someone you respect. And that shift, subtle, grounded, undeniable, creates a magnetic field around you. People may not be able to articulate what it is about you, but they feel it. They lean in. They listen closer. They give you space without even knowing why. That's what real magnetism looks like. You see, most people move through life with chaotic energy. Their minds race. Their eyes dart. Their hands fidget. They're always reaching for validation, for attention, for security, for love. And that reaching energy is loud. It's disruptive. It can draw short-term attention, but it rarely creates long-term respect. But when you become a man who is no longer reaching, when you are simply here, fully present, deeply grounded in who you are, you give off an entirely different signal. You're not chasing, you're not proving, you're not pretending. You're just being. And being in its purest form is captivating. It's rare, especially in a world addicted to noise, to approval, to overstimulation. That magnetic energy doesn't come from being perfect. It doesn't require model-level looks, endless charisma, or an extroverted personality. It comes from congruence, when who you are on the inside is aligned with how you carry yourself on the outside. It's when your posture reflects your purpose, when your stillness reflects your strength, when your silence reflects your security. People can sense that congruence from across the room. Women especially can feel it in an instant because your energy isn't asking for anything. It's not demanding. It's not needy. It's offering something. It's inviting, without pressure, without games, without manipulation. When you walk into a room with magnetic energy, you don't need to dominate the conversation. You don't need to announce yourself. Your energy introduces you before your words do. You might say very little, but your presence says everything. I'm here, I'm whole, I don't need to be seen, but I will be. And that calm confidence creates a tension that people can't quite explain. It's the reason heads turn when you walk by, even if you're not trying to be noticed. It's why people feel safer around you, more grounded in your presence, more open in your company. Because you're not adding to the chaos, you're calming it. This kind of energy is built in private. It's cultivated in the gym when no one's watching, in early mornings when you choose structure over comfort, in the decisions you make when no one will give you credit for them, in the way you talk to yourself when things get difficult. It's earned through emotional discipline, mental clarity, and relentless self-respect. You can't fake this kind of energy, not for long, because true magnetism isn't about momentary impact. It's about lasting impression. It's about who you are when the room goes quiet. It's about what people feel when they look at you and say, there's something different about him. And the most powerful part of this? You don't chase anymore. Not opportunities, not people, not love. Because your energy begins to attract what aligns with it. The right people come to you, not because you begged for their attention, but because your energy made them curious. Your focus creates gravity. Your discipline creates respect. Your peace creates desire. Women who are used to being pursued start pursuing you, not because you manipulated the situation, but because they want to understand what makes you different. You become the calm in their chaos, the clarity in their confusion, the anchor in their emotional waves. This doesn't make you superior. It doesn't mean you walk around with arrogance. Quite the opposite. It means you move with humility, because you no longer need to posture. You no longer need external validation to feel significant. You know who you are. You know what you're building. You know where you're going. And that kind of man doesn't need to raise his voice to be heard. He doesn't need to chase love to feel whole. He doesn't need to take up space. He naturally holds it. That's magnetism. That's presence. That's the kind of energy that doesn't fade when the conversation ends. It lingers. It lives in people's memory. It leaves a mark. So if you've been trying to force attraction, impress people, or get noticed, maybe it's time to stop reaching outward and start building inward. The more aligned you become with your values, your purpose, and your peace, the less you'll need to seek anything. Because when your energy becomes magnetic, everything meant for you will come, not because you needed it to, but because you became the kind of man it was drawn to. 7. Become spiritually detached. There's a rare kind of peace that comes when a man no longer feels chained to outcomes, when he no longer lets his emotional state rise and fall with how things unfold, when he learns to give his full effort, his complete focus, his deepest truth, without demanding a specific result in return. This is spiritual detachment, and it is one of the most difficult, most liberating milestones a man can reach. It means you've moved beyond needing the world to bend to your will. You've released the grip of control, of obsession, of if only. You're no longer chasing a future to prove your worth or make you feel enough. You've learned to find meaning in the doing, not just the reward. You understand that some people will misunderstand you, some plans will fail, some dreams will shift. But none of that touches your peace, because your peace no longer comes from what happens. It comes from who you are while it's happening. Spiritual detachment does not mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean you become cold or indifferent. In fact, you often care more deeply, but with a new kind of energy. You care from a place of clarity, not need. You love freely, not desperately. You pursue goals with intensity, but not with fear. You stop making your happiness conditional on success, attention, recognition, or validation. You wake up, you show up, you speak your truth, you give your best, and then you let go. You no longer try to control how people see you, how they respond, or what they do with what you offer. You give because you want to. You love because it's who you are. You work because you were built to build. And in that space, you become lighter, freer, more grounded, more joyful. This level of detachment is incredibly powerful, especially in how it changes your relationships with women. Most men, even if they don't realize it, carry an invisible craving for outcomes in every interaction. They want the message answered, the call returned, the attraction reciprocated, the attention maintained. And when it's not, they shrink, they worry, they overthink. Their energy becomes tight, reactive, anxious. But a man who is spiritually detached is different. He expresses interest, but he's not invested in approval. He initiates connection, but he doesn't chase it. He gives his presence fully, but doesn't collapse if it's not matched. He understands that people are free to choose, and that includes walking away. And he is okay with that, because he doesn't base his value on how long someone stays. He bases it on how true he was while they were present. Women feel this instantly. They feel when a man is free, when he's not clinging to them as a source of happiness, but sharing space because he already has joy. When he can walk away with grace, not resentment. When he can sit in silence without tension. When he can love without needing to possess. That energy is rare. It is deeply attractive, not because it plays games, but because it shows strength. A strength that comes from not needing anything outside of yourself to feel complete. And that completeness is what creates the space for a deeper kind of love, one that is not based on control, fear, or lack. Spiritual detachment also transforms how you handle life's uncertainties. You stop trying to predict or manipulate the future. You stop living in constant reaction to wins and losses. You develop a resilience that is rooted in trust, not blind optimism, but grounded faith. You trust that your effort will take you where you need to go, even if the route looks different than expected. You trust that what is meant for you won't require you to beg or break yourself. You trust that your path will unfold, not perfectly but purposefully, as long as you stay aligned with your values. This kind of trust cannot be taught by books or seminars. It is forged through experience, reflection, and the courage to let go of what you cannot control. And that trust becomes your power. It makes you unshakable in situations that would destroy lesser men. You don't panic when things fall apart. You don't spiral when people leave. You don't crumble under rejection, because you've stopped tying your worth to outcomes. You've stopped performing life. You've started living it, with presence, with depth, with unwavering self-respect. Your peace is no longer a hostage to circumstance. It is a companion that walks with you, no matter what road you're on. When you reach this stage, you become a completely different presence in the world. You become the man who can lead calmly, love fully, speak honestly, and walk away peacefully. You stop needing to be understood to feel understood by yourself. You stop needing to be right to feel secure in your truth. You stop needing to win every battle because you've already won the war inside. And in that space, you become the man who doesn't just inspire attraction, you inspire transformation. Spiritual detachment is not the end of growth. It's the beginning of mastery. It's the moment you realize that power isn't about holding on tighter. It's about knowing when to release. It's about showing up with your whole heart, doing your part, and then letting the world respond however it will. That's not weakness. That's the highest form of strength. The kind that doesn't shout, the kind that doesn't cling, the kind that simply is. And once you taste that level of freedom, you never go back, because you no longer need life to go your way to be at peace. You've become the peace, and that is unforgettable. Comment unstoppable below if you've made it to the end. That tells me you're not here for motivation. You're here for transformation. And if this video gave you even one insight, support this channel. Subscribe, like, share this message. You're not just helping this channel grow. You're helping others grow. You're helping men become leaders.